Hello and welcome back, or if you're here for the first time, just welcome. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Crimson Campaign by Brian McClellan. This is the second book in the Mage Trilogy and a sequel to A Promise of Blood. I'm going to keep the first part of this review spoiler-free before we dive into more spoilery territory. I had a great time with The Promise of Blood, and I flew through it in a couple of days, and this book was no different. I think it's an improvement over the first book in just about every way. It's very evident that Brian McClellan grew a lot as an author between his debut novel, A Promise of Blood, and the sophomore follow-up novel, Crimson Campaign. So if you've read A Promise of Blood and you liked it a lot, I think there's a really good chance you'll like this one even more. While overall I thought A Promise of Blood was a very strong fantasy novel, my main issue with it is that it wandered a lot. There was a lot of twists and turns, and it felt chaotic and like it didn't have a real clear sense of direction. This book feels a lot more focused. All of the characters' storylines feel like they're heading in a set direction, starting to barrel towards an inevitable conclusion. So if you haven't already, go and pick yourself up a copy of both A Promise of Blood and A Crimson Campaign. I highly recommend them. They're just a real good time. Now I want to get into more specific characters and character arcs and plot points, so spoiler warning, you've been warned. If you haven't picked up a copy, go pick one up. Read the book, come back and watch this. Again, this is a great novel. It's a great follow-up novel. It improves upon the first in every way, but I do still have some criticism I'd like to lay out. And just like with my review of A Powder Mage, this comes from a place of love. I feel like these books are my friends. The story of A Crimson Campaign kicks off not long after the events at the end of A Promise of Blood. It seems like it's still not totally clear to everyone that the god Kresimir has returned. Not everyone believes Taniel. Adro is still at war with Kez. It's not going great. At the outset of this novel, Tamis has to leave his son Taniel, who's basically still in a coma from the events of South Pike, and he takes his army and goes and has to defend a city that's on the verge of being conquered by Kez. And then through a series of events, he gets trapped behind enemy lines, and every one of the Adro soldiers believes that Tamis has been killed with all of his powder mages. And that's sort of the backbone for this novel, is Tamis trying to get back to his nation, traveling through enemy territory, not really knowing where Taniel is, if he's still alive and well, is he still in a coma, and the whole army believing that Tamis is dead, and they're just losing ground every day to the Kez army. No one really knows whether or not Kresimir has returned. There's lots of rumors that he's with the Kez. There's rumors that he's losing his mind. And Taniel is kind of going through some PTSD after the events of South Pike when he shot Kresimir in the eye. But Taniel wakes to also find that he has some strange new abilities. So he and Karpol basically go to the front and start winning the war single-handedly. And it's awesome. And they start butting heads with General Ket. And Major Donovan, I think was her name, Doravan or something. I will spell out the correct name here after I go look it up. Those two were really good female villains. Really good opposition to Taniel. General Ket is a really frustrating villain because she believes that she's right, even though we know that she's wrong. Taniel is convinced that Tamis is alive. General Ket is convinced that Tamis is dead. She should be on the same side as Taniel. They should be working together, but they're not seeing eye to eye. It seems like she's working against Adro. It just feels like a losing war, and she's not really trying to win it. I thought that General Ket was a much better villain than Julene from the first book. Taniel's storyline by far was my favorite. I still enjoyed Tamis's. I kind of wish we had been given a little bit more suspense, some more uncertainty as to whether or not he was alive. It was evident to us as the reader the entire time that he was alive, which does create some tension. I think it would have been better had we not known for a little while that he had survived the battle and was behind enemy lines. But then later we start getting some chapters from his point of view that show that he is alive and that he's fighting for his life to get back to Adro. In book one, I felt that the character of Laura was very underutilized and underdeveloped, and that kind of continues in this book. She gets a lot more page time. Still, the POVs were limited to 4 characters. You got Tamis, Taniel, Nyla, and Adamat, and part of me wishes that the POVs would have expanded in this sequel to include more characters, specifically Laura. We never really got to hear her side of the story of why she cheated on Taniel, and we still don't really get an answer in this book. It seems like maybe she was just seduced by somebody and fell for it. She does seem like she's kind of a promiscuous character. All I can really tell you about her is that she's a powder mage and she was Taniel's fiance at one point. That's it. She's kind of fiery, but that's kind of all I know about her. Even 2 novels in on this trilogy, and I wish we knew more. In this book, Laura does play a little bit more of a central role, but it's not expanded enough in my opinion. We do have some strong female characters with Nyla specifically. And I really like the character of Carpole. I think Carpole and Taniel are such a great duo. It's one of my favorite duos that I've seen in a fantasy series. Adamat's storyline was okay. It kind of felt like his knack went to the wayside a bit in this book, along with a lot of the Knacked abilities. The Knacked kind of have more minor magical abilities, and so I understand why it's maybe not at the forefront of the story, but it's a nice icing on the cake. And I feel like Adamat should have, I don't know, I feel like his knack should play a little bit more central role into what he's doing as an inspector. There were a couple storylines that I felt like were a little bit unsatisfying. In the first book, Bo is the last privilege from the Adran Cabal, and he has this, I think it's like a necklace, it's called a Geis, that will basically compel him to avenge the king. And this is setting up a conflict between Tamis and Bo, and I was really eager to see how that was going to come to a head, but in this book, they just kind of, it just kind of felt like Brian McClellan didn't really want to deal with that storyline anymore, so he just wrapped it up super quick, and to me it was unsatisfying. I really thought that was a compelling storyline, and I wanted to see it developed more and to see where it was going. Bo basically grew up under Tamis's wing, and I thought that was a really interesting conflict, but it doesn't really go anywhere. I also thought that Lord Vitus was a very formidable villain from the first book. He's very conniving, he's very kind of slimy and spidery. He always seems like he knows what is going on at all times. He's got his fingers in just so many different things, but I thought that his storyline wrapped up kind of unsatisfying as well, because I wasn't really sure if he died. I really wanted him to die. I loved to see some justice happen, but Bo essentially captures him, rips off his arms, and then wraps him up in a carpet and takes him away, and he slowly dies off screen of blood loss and trauma. And we don't see his death. It kind of happens off screen. I'm pretty sure he's dead, but we don't see it happen. We don't see his last breath. Part of me is like, is he going to make another appearance in the next book with no arms? Is he going to... I don't know. I don't know. If he doesn't come back, then I'll be like, oh, okay, I guess he is actually dead. It was just kind of a weird death. Same with Alonska's betrayal. This didn't really feel like it was set up and like it was inevitable. I like the feeling when I'm reading a book of like trying to figure out who done it. Okay, who's the traitor here? We know there's a traitor in Tamis's army, someone high up. Who is it? Is it General Kett? Because I really hate that lady. Who is it? But it's Alonska. And it didn't really feel like it was set up. I like to read these books and try to figure out the mystery and then look back and be like, oh, that makes sense. It had to have been them all along. I didn't get that sense from this. I don't know why Alonska did what he did, why he betrayed Tamis. And same with Nyla. I felt like her becoming some privilege that doesn't need gloves. It came out of left field. I didn't feel like there was a lot of setup for this. Like there weren't a lot of hints or clues dropped beforehand. All of a sudden, Bo was just like, I knew it. You're privileged. And she's like, what? I'm a privileged? Yeah, and you don't even have to wear gloves. I don't know what that's about. This subplot with Jacob being hidden as the rightful heir to the throne, that hasn't really gone anywhere either yet. I don't know that it will. It doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. Hey everybody, Editor Andrew here with unkempt hair, wearing pajamas on a Saturday morning as I edit this. Another plotline that for me did not wrap up in a satisfying manner was the conflict between Tamis and Nixlaus. I'm noticing a pattern with Brian McClellan. He's a modern fantasy writer. He often doesn't give us the conclusions that we're expecting or hoping for. As a reader, we want to see Tamis confront and defeat Nixlaus, but he doesn't give it to us. Instead, Nixlaus is fleeing from Tamis in a carriage as a battle is raging in the city, and it's raining, and his carriage ends up getting overturned, and he breaks his neck and dies in a pool of water. And at this point, I've read the third book, and this is a pattern that continues. Maybe I tend to enjoy more melodrama type stuff, where you get these big confrontations at the climax that you've been waiting for this entire time. I'm okay with having my expectations subverted. In fact, I enjoy it, as long as the thing that I get as a replacement for my expectations is better than what I was expecting. I'll talk more about this in my review of the third book on Autumn Republic, but I just wanted to throw this in here. This probably sounds like I didn't like the book because I'm just kind of venting here on a few little things, but I did. I really enjoyed the book a lot. These are just a few things that I felt like could have been done better to take this from a 4-star book to a 5-star book. I thought it was a great book. I thought it was a big improvement over the first book. I love these characters. I love this world. I love the magic system. I think these are fantastic books. I wholeheartedly recommend them. I'm really excited to see how things wrap up in the third book. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I hope to see you back here when I review the Autumn Republic.